Hola, hola, bienvenidos, muy buenas noches. Mi nombre es John Mejía, asesor del programa de certificación y miembro certificado de Maxwell Leadership. Y me encanta estar compartiendo con ustedes este espacio. Estaba leyendo en el chat de dónde nos están acompañando la noche, la tarde o el día de hoy, dependiendo de dónde te encuentras en el mundo. Estaba viendo que hay personas desde Roma, Italia, personas en Costa Rica, en Argentina, en Uruguay, en Honduras, en Miami, en Texas, en Ciudad de México, en Cancún, en Paraguay, República Dominicana. Bienvenidos a todos los que se están conectando. De verdad, para mí es un placer, un honor estar compartiendo y ser el host del evento súper especial que tenemos preparado para ustedes el día de hoy. Ahora, si no se han alistado, yo les recomiendo tener lápiz y papel. Corran, corran, vamos a comenzar en un par de minutos, pero corran, alisten esos lápices, esos papeles, porque hoy vamos a tomar notas, hoy vamos a aprender. He participado en muchos eventos de información, pero son muy pocos los eventos de formación como el día de hoy, donde vamos a estar aprendiendo esas 3 A para hacerse un líder del camino alto. Y vamos a estar aprendiendo nada más y nada menos del propio John Maxwell y del propio Marco. John Maxwell lleva más de 50 años capacitando, entrenando personas a nivel mundial. Miles de personas, las cuales se han capacitado a raíz de su liderazgo, a raíz de sus valores. Él ha publicado más de 130 libros en más de 70 idiomas y es el fundador de Maxwell Leadership. Y Mark Cole es el CEO, el presidente de las compañías de John Maxwell, es mano derecha de John Maxwell y también es un facilitador de liderazgo para empresas de diferentes tamaños. Y me encanta aprender de ellos. ¿Por qué? Recientemente, John Maxwell lanzó su último libro. Lo lanzó en inglés hace un par de meses. El libro aún no está disponible en español. Hoy lo tenemos como primicia. Y ustedes van a aprender precisamente directamente de ellos, de ese evento que hicieron, lanzando el libro. Ahora, este evento se hizo para todas las plataformas de Maxwell Leadership. En este momento somos más de 51,000 miembros certificados en 163 países. Y tenemos plataforma de inglés, plataforma de español, tenemos plataforma en francés, plataforma en alemán, plataforma en vietnamís, plataforma en rumano, en polaco, próximamente plataforma en portugués. El equipo está creciendo, es creciendo a una velocidad exorbitante y te necesitamos a ti. Y te necesitamos que estés aprendiendo y formándote con nosotros el día de hoy. Y en este evento vamos a aprender precisamente directamente de ellos. Yo sé que el tiempo apremia y estamos listos para aprender. Así que demos inicio a esta transmisión.
The 3 A's of making high road leadership your next level step to greater impact and greater income. With your hosts, John C. Maxwell and Mark Cole.
Let's look at the sad reality of today. Too many of us are affected by division, by scarcity, and if you win, I lose mentality. Our world is broken, and the symptoms around all of us are broken. The sad fact is, there is good money to be made in stoking the fires of division. Media is doing it. Politicians are doing it. There's money to be made in division. But here's the good news. We can make an impact and an income by bringing people together even in a divided world. And we're going to show you how to do that in this webinar today. By the time we're done today, you're going to have, number one, a clear definition of high road leadership, what it means, how it is different, and why it's important for your future and the future of the world around you. Number two, today we're going to give you a clear path to connecting high road leadership to everything you do. It'll increase your influence. It'll make an immediate difference in your world and in the world around you. Number three, we're going to give you a clear next step to putting high road leadership into practice. We're going to do that in a way that elevates your joy, your sense of significance, and your financial position. We're going to be giving away 5 signed hardcover copies of John's newest book, High Road Leadership, later in the broadcast. So you're definitely going to want to stick around until the end and have John sign you a personalized copy. So let's go ahead and knock out the first of those 3 for the audience. John, in a nutshell, give us a clear definition of high road leadership and why it's different than a lot of the leadership we see demonstrated today.
Well, Mark, what I've discovered about high road leadership is that it's a leadership that truly makes a positive difference in the lives of others. And the reason that high road leaders make that positive difference is because they are wanting more for their people than from their people. It's an issue of heart. It's an issue of motives. And so in high road leadership, what I try to do, Mark, is I try to give pictures of what does a high road leader look like so that we can kind of visualize it and see it. Because honestly, you and I both know we don't see a lot of high road leaders today. And so the world is so desperately in need of them. And one of the reasons why, again, as you mentioned a moment ago, is because there's a lack of an abundance mindset. And I know we're going to be able to talk about that a little bit later. But, in my High Road Leadership book, I talk about the characteristics of high road leaders, such as they bring people together instead of dividing people. You just talked about that a moment ago. They value all people, not just their group, but they value everybody. They acknowledge they're human, and so they're in touch with themselves to the place where they're certainly able to say, I don't get it right every time. I'm not a perfect leader. I hope I'm a real leader, an authentic one, but I'm not a perfect one. They do the right things for the right reasons, and motives matter because people are the reason we have our motives, and people matter. They give more than they take. They develop an emotional capacity to carry a heavier emotional load than most people. They place other people before themselves on their agenda so they know and understand servant leadership. They embrace the authentic lifestyle. They're accountable for their actions. They live by a bigger picture than themselves. They don't keep score, and they desire the best for others. As you know, for years, I've taught that everything rises and falls on leadership. And the rising of leadership is 2 things, good leadership skills and good values. And what we know is that so many leaders, they have leadership skills, but they don't have good values. And because they don't have good values, instead of really helping the people and motivating them and allowing them to climb higher, they manipulate the people. Now it's all for their own personal gain and for their own personal advantage. And high road leaders, Mark, they just don't let that happen. It's all about putting the people first. That's something we've done in Maxwell Leadership. It was you that came up with the great statement, everyone deserves to be led well. Well, when you have a high road leader, you're led well. When you have a low road leader, you're not led well. You're led for whatever their purposes are. I can still remember several years ago being in Kiev, Ukraine, getting ready to speak to 15,000 people, and my interpreter in the green room about 5 minutes before I went out said, John, you have to understand, you talk about adding value to people, and that's what leaders do, but you're going to talk to 15,000 people, and you go out and talk about leaders adding value to people, they're not going to understand what you're talking about. They've never known a leader that added value to them. They've only known leaders that took advantage of them. In other words, they've only known low road leaders, not high road leaders. And I'll never forget that impression it made upon me as I had to, again, realize that so many people, they're not led well. But when you're not led well, it's because you have leaders that think more of themselves than they think of others. And what I love about what we're trying to do in all of our companies is we're just always trying to put other people first. Our core of who we are is servant leadership and putting other people first. And I think we practice that really well. And I think because of that, a lot of people are receiving great benefit from it. So that's kind of what a high road leader is. It just put it this way. A high road leader is a plus in your life, and a low road leader is a minus in your life. Okay. So when you look at the people that lead you, are they making things better for you, or are they making things better for themselves?
You know, John, you and I got a text today from a longtime friend, a leader that leads literally tens of thousands of teammates a week. And that leader said to you something that I believe too, and that is this book is the best book that you've ever written, which we love that, for that to be said about your most recent book. Thank you for still continuing to get better. But the other thing they said, Mark or John, this makes every one of your other books make sense in what your leadership legacy is. Yeah. And I think you've nailed that with this book.
Yeah, I do too. I think that if somebody is looking for a picture of what a good leader looks like, this is the book. I think it is a great mentoring book. Yesterday, I was having dinner with my family, and I was talking to them about high road leadership, and I was talking to my grandchildren especially. And I said, I want to make sure that I mentor you on this book. I want you to have a picture of what a good leader looks like, because I want you to grow up and be a high road leader in your own life. And so I do think that if you're looking for a book that gives you a picture of what you need to be as far as a leader, and if you're looking for a book that kind of helps you mentor your team, it's going to be the best mentoring leadership book I know for sure that I've ever written. So anyway, yeah, if it helps the people, that's why we write the books, to help the people.
That's exactly right. If you haven't picked up your copy, we'll give you a way to do that here on the screen, as well as to pick up a book for your team. But here's what I want to do today. I want to give you 3 A's of making high road leadership your next step to greater impact and greater income. So let's get started. The first A is an abundance mindset. Now, John, you've talked about abundance many, many years. The idea of abundance mindset comes straight out of chapter 5 in this book. See, chapter 5 of this book is titled Give More Than You Take. And John, you say, the pathway to giving more than you take is an abundance mindset. Can you tell us more about why having an abundance mindset is so important to high road leadership?
I'll be glad to, Mark. First of all, there are 2 kinds of people. There are people that have an abundance mindset, and there are people that have a scarcity mindset. And whatever mindset you have, that is your world. And so when people talk to me that have a scarcity mindset and they say, well, I don't think there's enough to go around, I look at them, and for them, I say, you're right. You'll never have enough to go around, because your mindset won't allow you to have abundance. It is always, I've got to save what is mine because I may not have any more. An abundance mindset, basically, Mark, has room for others. And a scarcity mindset has room just for myself. And I think that's a big difference. If I have an abundance mindset, I'm a river. I'm going to let what I have just flow through me to others. If I have a scarcity mindset, I'm a reservoir. I'm going to hold everything I have, because I may not always have it. And so therefore, I want to make sure that, I'm saving up for a rainy day. And so these 2 worlds, though, are real worlds. They're not imaginary worlds. And so what I want people to understand is it's possible to have a scarcity mindset and do without, while the person beside you has an abundance mindset and has plenty. And you're sitting side by side. So it isn't like your worlds are very far and separate. What's far apart isn't your worlds. What's far apart is your thinking. And when your thinking is different, and there's abundance and there's scarcity and it's far apart, let me tell you, whatever you think is exactly what's going to happen. So let's say about scarcity mindset. So I got my fist clenched. I'm holding on. I'm just holding on to this. This is all I got, and I'm just holding on to it, and nobody's going to get it from me, and it's mine, and it's my security. Now, the good news is, if I hold on this tight to my whatever it is I'm holding on to, in this case, some water, but if I'm holding on to it tight, the good news is nobody can take it from me. But here's what people don't understand. If I have my hands clenched holding on with a scarcity mindset to what I have, I can't receive anything. A clenched hand never received anything. You've got to open up your hands this way to receive something. And the moment I lessen my grip and let whatever I have that I thought was so secure to me go, I now am a potential recipient for so much more. So it's an abundance mindset is an open hand. And a scarcity mindset is a closed hand. And I just want people to know that when your hand is closed, when your mind is closed, when your heart is closed, it's closed. And the good things that want to come in just can't get in. So whatever world, here's what I don't want anybody to miss on this. Because again, Mark, we're passionate about helping people. Mm-hmm. Whatever your mindset is today, it is true to you. And it's your world. And I'm not trying to criticize it in any way and say, well, that's not true, because it is true. If you have a scarcity mindset, you'll have less than a person who has an abundance mindset. That's an absolute fact. That's not a figure of your imagination. That is a reality in your life. If you have an abundance mindset, you're going to receive a lot more than a person who has a scarcity mindset. So Our mindset determines whether we have abundance or scarcity, which so it determines how much blessing we have in our life, a lot or very little.
Can you share one of your favorite stories of people practicing an abundance mindset?
Well, yeah, I practice abundance mindset. Yep. And, what's interesting is in my extended family on both sides, my wife's side and my side, I have several family members that, have a scarcity mindset. And our worlds are totally different. I remember my brother, who has an abundance mindset, has been highly successful financially. Very, 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 very successful. And so we were in a conversation with there were about 6 or 7 of us, but a couple of them had a real scarcity mindset. And so Larry's talking about abundance, and I'm going to try to attempt this if I can. And this is a project I would like to do in the future. And I watched these two people have the scarcity mindset, and they were closing in. The fear was literally clothing them and separating them from what Larry was saying, and I could see it. And finally, they looked at him, and I was so proud of them, because they said, "Well, what happens if you're taking these risks, and what happens if you lose everything?" And Larry looked at him, and he said, "Well, if I lose everything, I'll live like you." and I looked at that, and I thought how true that really is. They're so concerned about what he's going to lose, they don't realize that every day they're doing without, not because plenty is not available to them. Plenty's not available to them, not because plenty's not knocking at the door. They're not answering the door. And so therefore they don't get to have that abundance. But, well, what happens if you lose everything? Well, then I want to live like you. And the scarcity people got to understand that if you have a scarcity mindset, when the rest of us have abundance mindset, if we would lose it all, we're just going to come and live next door to you. And the moment you understand this, it'll kick you out of that mind. It should. You should say, wait a minute, I don't want to live that way, because that's not the way you want to live.
Well, and I'm so convicted right here, because you said this, and you said it in a very humble way. But you said you have an abundance mindset, and you do. I remember 14 years ago, we were launching the Maxwell Leadership Team, and now it's 51,000. I'll talk more about that in just a moment.
Sure.
But John, I was very concerned in giving your content, your special content, to all of these people that I didn't know. I had a scarcity mindset. And you said, Mark, I'm not worried about that, because I know the source. And I have a lot more content in me, which is going to make me relevant. And I'm sitting here, and team, I got to be honest with you as I'm talking with you today. This idea I'm presenting to you, we've created a business on intellectual property. I wanted to protect it. John's created a big business on intellectual property. He wants to give it away because he knows there's more where that comes from. So, John,
that's a good example. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it makes me look really, really in need of an abundance mindset. Hey,
well, you have one now. In fact, what people need to hear out of that story is you give a story of yourself having a scarcity mindset, but that isn't who you are today. You have an abundance mindset. And the great takeaway to me is, if anybody that's listening, watching this, they're sitting there and saying, well, I have a scarcity mindset. Just look at Mark Cole. In other words, you may have it now, but you don't have to carry it the rest of your life. You can get rid of that. It's a choice. And that's, in fact, my greatest appeal is for people who have a scarcity mindset is jump the fence. I mean, you don't need to stay in that scarcity world all your life. On the other side of the fence is an abundant world.
So when we continue to read in chapter 5 about high road leaders, they give more than they take. John, you give 6 things that someone with an abundance mindset freely gives. You mentioned talent, you mentioned time, you mentioned opportunities, money, connections, and experience. I'd like to settle on those last 2, connections and experiences. First of all, let's take connections. You have a practice that you've had for decades when it comes to having a learning lunch with people. Can you talk a moment about that?
Yeah, I'm glad to. And what's beautiful about what I talk about is every person, again, watching us, they can do exactly what I'm going to do. This is every one of you can do what I'm just about to explain every month. I've done this for 40 years now, Mark. Every month I have what I call a learning lunch. And at that learning lunch, I take somebody out to lunch. Mm-hmm. I buy their meal. I don't even have lunch. I just ask them 7 questions because I want to learn from them. They have something to teach me. And the 7 questions I ask them will be my learning, research, and laboratory. And I ask them, what's the most important lesson you ever learned in your life? This gets their wisdom. I ask them, how has failure shaped your life? This teaches me a lot about how they handled adversity that will help me to handle adversity. I talk to them about what are you passionate about right now, which lets me know if they're a growing leader or if they're living off of yesterday. When they're groping for what they're passionate about right now, I know they're living off of yesterday. And then I ask them, what have you read that I need to read? That's about a book. What have you experienced? That goes back to what you're talking about right now. That mm-hmm. I need to experience. Who do you know that I should know? That's a networking question. And then the last question is how can I serve you? What can I do for you? Because you've given me probably this time an hour and a half of your time, and I've been over here taking notes, and I've been learning from your life. Now, the reason this works is because one, I have a learning attitude, and I'm willing to ask questions. And if you just take those 7 questions or make your own, it's okay with me. What's important is not even the questions as much as the intention of every month. Exposing yourself to somebody that's bigger, better, faster than you. Again, I teach if you're at the head of the class, you're in the wrong class. Mm-hmm. That's so true. And so I want everybody that's watching us, listening to us, I want you to be passionate about finding people that you can ask questions from, that you can learn from. And I do that connection every month. It's called Learning Lunches, and all of our friends can do that for sure.
So let's talk about an abundance mindset and how it uses experience to give more than they take. How do you do that?
Well, I'm an experience junkie, that as well. So, I mean, I love, it doesn't have to be big experiences. I just like little things that are taking me on a little experience trip. But here's, in the experience area, what I like to do is I like to help people do 2 things. I like to help them enjoy the experience and evaluate the experience. And they're 2 different things. The enjoying the experience is, how can I make this experience something different, more fun than what they've ever had before? And it may be as corny as me looking at people on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., like you've been with me before, and say, hey, let's do the hokey pokey right here. Yeah. Yeah. Nobody's done the hokey pokey on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Most people are more sophisticated than me, but I'm letting them have fun. But then evaluating the experience is all about, what did you learn? What did you love? And I ask that all the time, because experience isn't the best teacher, but evaluated experience is the best teacher. But somebody has to ask us the questions to cause us to stop long enough to look at the experience and evaluate it to get the good out of it. It's in the evaluation that we learn, not in the experience itself, but what did I learn from that experience? So I love helping people enjoy experiences, and I love to help people connect.
Well, you've been incredible in my life of teaching me the power and the abundance thinking of opportunities. I've mentioned our 51,000 plus coaches multiple times, and you just a few weeks ago was with the Prime Minister of Cambodia, who invited you in to do transformation work like 28 other heads of states, prime ministers, presidents have done. And here's what you did a long time ago when you accepted the one. You said, if I come, I'm going to expose this opportunity, this memory, this experience to my coaches. And so now you take our coaches around the world creating experiences out of abundance. We'll talk more about that later. All right.
And I love every moment of it.
Yeah, so earlier I talked about that we're going to give away 5 free signed copies of your new book, High Road Leadership, at the end of the broadcast. Well, John, the whole time you're talking, I'm watching comments. I'm watching the engagement. The audience is leaning forward. They're wanting to hear this message. So I'm telling you what we're going to do. I'm going to up the ante, and I'm going to give away 10 free signed copies. So, John, can you handle 10 signatures?
Wow, you're asking for a big commitment, but hey, for you and for the people, yeah, I can handle that.
Okay. So I'll explain. Thank you. I'll explain to the audience in just a little while at the end of the webinar how we're going to give you the opportunity to be one of the 10 individuals now to receive a freshly signed brand new copy of John's book, High Road Leadership. But now it's time to continue with the 3 A's of making high road leadership your next step to greater impact and greater income. And we're going to take some time and talk about this second A, which is authenticity. As you know in the book, High Road Leader, that leadership knows how to embrace authenticity. But now, John, this whole topic of embracing authenticity is from chapter 8 in your book. And I'd love to take you through just some of the quotes you have in this book. It's incredible. You said sharing our true flawed selves is the only real connection and the only real love that can happen. It's the only way to step into your full power and purpose for our lives. That's from our friend Jamie Kern Lima, who incidentally sold her IT Cosmetics company for $1 billion. Here's another one from Craig Rochelle. People would rather follow a leader who is always real than one who is always right. Yeah. And then, John, you said when your authentic self is flawed, but it operates according to good values, you're willing to show it to others. John, in this chapter, you have a whole section on embrace the choices you make over the gifts you've been given. There's a lesson in there about Jeff Bezos. Can you tell us more about that whole concept and why it's so important to the high road leader?
I love that part of the book, and it's such a great statement. I'm glad you pulled it out. And we're talking about embracing the choices you make over the gifts that you've been given. Mm-hmm. As a parent, I made a mistake with my children. I didn't know better, but it still was a mistake. I would find out what they're good at and encourage them to do it, which you should. But I would talk about their giftedness a lot more than their choices. And my son Joel was very gifted in technology, so I talk about how good he was in technology. My daughter is very good in relationships. I talked to her about that, how good she is. I wish that I would have known that when I was the age of those who are watching us right now. And I wish that I would have embraced and brought before them and taught them that the choices they make are greater than the gifts that they've been given. The gifts that we've been given those gifts. But the choices we make, Mark, this makes a huge difference in expanding our talent. In fact, I wrote a book several years ago called Talent is Never Enough. Mm-hmm. And the whole book, it came out of the fact, of course, I grew up in Ohio, so I'm a Ohio State fan, and I used to go up to the Ohio State, Michigan when Jim Tressel was their coach. And I was looking through the manual he had for his football players, and the manual there was a whole page on the manual that said things that do not require talent. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. And it had a page of things like being to the meeting on time, wow. Having discipline in your life, caring for your teammate. He had his whole list, probably 30 things that didn't require any talent at all. And I saw that, and that's where I got the idea to write the book, Talent is Never Enough. I got it from Coach Tressel in his planning book for his players. And so what I talk about is the fact that the choices that we have with our gifts is what enhances our gifts. And so like belief lifts our talent, and passion, what's that do? It energizes the talent that we have within ourselves. And courage, that's a test of our talent. We don't know how far talent will take us until we've had to be courageous in something that we fear in our life. And what does initiative do? It activates our talent. Teachability, what does it do? It expands our talent. And focus, it directs our talent. And I could go on and on of all the choices, because I think in that book I had like 15 or 16 choices that you and I can make that will take the gifts that we've been given, the talent that we have, and greatly enhance it. But without making those choices, the talent and the gifts that we have never grow, never expand, and never really multiply and help others like they could if we make great choices right beside the talent that we've been given.
Well, one of them, and we're going to talk about this in just a little bit, but one of them you talk about there is how teamwork multiplies your talent.
Yes.
But before we move on to the third A of making high road leadership your next step to greater impact and greater income, let's remind everyone, before this webinar ends, we're going to tell you how you can be one of 10 people to receive a free signed hardcover copy of John's newest book. This book I'm holding up right here, High Road Leadership. And remember earlier in the webinar, we promised you 3 things that this webinar would give you. I want to just remind you, it's going to give you a clear definition of high road leadership, what it means, how it's different, why it's important for your future and the future of the world around you, of you being different. We're going to give you a clear path to connecting high road leadership to everything you do, increasing your influence, increasing your life, and making an immediate difference in your world. And then we're going to give you a clear next step to putting high road leadership into practice, doing it in a way that elevates your joy, your sense of significance, and your financial position. So, John, you've already given us this clear definition of high road leadership and why it's important. We've been giving you a clear path to connecting high road leadership to everything that you and I do as leaders. And specifically, we've talked about an abundance mindset, how to have an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. And then this concept, John, I've watched you do it over and over in your life, this idea of embracing authenticity. But the last A in making high road leadership your next step to greater impact and greater income is accountability. This is taking accountability for your actions. Now, you cover this tremendously in chapter 9 of the book. So, John, before I speak on this, or I asked you to speak on this, I just want to tell you and say that the concept of taking accountability is really a solution to a problem. Yes. And the problem this solves is our tendency to make excuses. You've heard it. I've heard it. Leaders like to make excuses. But I love how you write in the book, the better the excuse, the worse it is, because we're more likely to let ourselves off the hook. You also say something that I think deserves to be unpacked a little more. You distinguish taking accountability from being accountable. In the book you write, take accountability instead of being accountable. Why? Because this process is not passive. Accountability is active and intentional. So, John, can you tell us some of the differences between taking accountability and being accountable?
Well, yeah, again, being accountable, I want to stress as well that, I'm working on, I'm trying to be accountable. That's very passive. When I take accountability, I own it now. It's not like maybe I'll be accountable and I'm thinking about it and trying to work my way into it. When I take accountability, it's kind of like, give me the ball, coach. I'm ready to run with it. And that's very active and that's very aggressive. And that's very important. And here is why. If I ask everybody that's with us right now, how many of you would probably like to improve your life in the next 3 months more than you've ever improved your life? Every hand would be raised. Everybody wants to improve their life. Oh, in the next 3 months, oh my gosh. And if somebody raises their hand, if you're raising your hand right now, you want to improve your life, let me just say to you, the quickest and the greatest way to improve your life is to be accountable to somebody. The moment there is accountability in your life, it's going to make you a better person. We all have a tendency. What I have a tendency to do, Mark, is I have a tendency to judge other people by their actions, but judge myself by my intentions. Now, that's huge.
Yeah.
So if you're not acting right, I say, well, Mark, he's just not a disciplined person. If I'm not a disciplined person, I just say, well, I've just had a lot of things to do lately and I haven't been able to get to it. See, If you judge yourself by your actions, you'll be accountable. If you judge yourself by your intentions, intentions never allow us to be accountable. We always, through our intentions, have a reason why we couldn't, didn't, shouldn't have it. You know, it's the old Monday night Howard Cosell, Don Meredith in the TV booth watching a football game, and Howard Cosell is giving an excuse for receivers dropping the ball and for tackles being missed. And finally, Don Meredith couldn't handle it anymore, Mark. He said, if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. And every time I think of that, I think of that's a person that's not accountable. Their ifs and buts are a part of it. Well, if this would not happen, but that, and when you take action, you have to kick out excuses in your life and just say, I'm responsible.
No sé ustedes, pero yo ya tengo mi copia. Déjenme saber en el chat, yo los veo. ¿Quién quiere un libro? Y en español, completamente en español. Los leo. Antonio, Alex, Nancy, Camilo. Excelente. En unos minutos les voy a decir cómo pueden adquirir su copia y que el mismo John Maxwell se las firme. Imagínense obtener esto de recuerdo, fuera de que van a poder crecer, aprender en menos de 3 meses aplicando todos estos conocimientos y convirtiéndose en un líder del camino alto. ¿Por qué el camino alto? Porque hay muchas personas que lideran a un nivel alto, otras lideran a un nivel mediano y otras lideran a un nivel bajo. Y estoy seguro que ustedes están acá porque quieren liderar al nivel alto. No sé ustedes, yo estaba tomando nota y hay muchas pepitas de oro. Por supuesto, John Maxwell es un genio como pone todos estos conocimientos. Él dice que todo sube y baja por el liderazgo y es verdad. Y que eso se basa en la influencia que tienen tus valores con otras personas. Poderoso, poderoso. También anoté que da más de lo que recibes. Da más de lo que recibes. Pero tú no le puedes dar algo a alguien que tú no tienes. Por eso primero tienes que trabajar en ti. Por eso primero te tienes que capacitar tú. Por eso primero te tienes que leer tú el libro y convertirte en un líder del camino alto. Ahora, también anoté que tenemos que tener una actitud de aprendiz. Y eso es clave. Constantemente tenemos que estar abiertos a todos esos conocimientos. Tenemos que saber cuando hay información que nos va a ayudar a crecer. Por eso les dije que hoy no era simplemente un evento de información, sino de formación. Y les voy a explicar a ustedes cómo pueden formarse, cómo pueden tener un impacto mucho mayor. Adicional a eso, anoté también que es importante tener la intención y exponerse a algo que puede ser mejor o más grande de lo que somos en este momento. Ojo, a algo que puede ser mejor o más grande de lo que somos en este momento. Y por supuesto, esta que está clásica, las decisiones son más importantes que tus talentos. Todos tenemos talentos, todos nacemos con talentos, pero si no trabajamos en ellos, se van a quedar simplemente ahí. Por eso es importante que trabajemos en nosotros mismos. Y todo líder del camino alto debe desarrollar 3 habilidades. Si estás tomando nota, escribe esto. Debes desarrollar 3 habilidades. La habilidad de poder comunicar y conectar, la habilidad de poder escuchar y la habilidad de poder enseñar. Y aquí es donde viene Maxwell Leadership a ser parte de este juego, de crear tu mapa para que tú puedas lograr tu éxito. Y quiero compartir con ustedes exactamente eso, la información de la certificación que tú recibes con Maxwell Leadership. Ahora, cuando ustedes se hacen parte de Maxwell Leadership, también lo van a hacer por John Maxwell. Yo entiendo los valores, la influencia, el respaldo que van a tener. Eso nos da credibilidad, número 1. Yo me certifiqué en el 2015 y a raíz de esa certificación se me abrieron muchísimas puertas. He podido capacitar en empresas, a equipos, a grupos, en redes de mercadeo, en todas partes, lo que es liderazgo, crecimiento personal, ventas, comunicación, información que ustedes van a tener a su disposición cuando se hacen parte de Maxwell Leadership. Van a tener contenido probado y comprobado a nivel mundial. Contenido que ustedes pueden utilizar para monetizar y les voy a mostrar cómo lo monetizan también. Tienen un potencial gigante porque seguramente ustedes ya están liderando a una persona, ustedes mismos, a un grupo o de pronto en su empresa. Tienen el potencial de desarrollar esa habilidad poder liderar a un nivel alto. Un nivel alto. Ténganlo muy pendiente. En el equipo somos más de 51,000 personas en 163 países. Y ustedes van a venir a ser parte de la comunidad en español. Ya somos más de 10,000 personas. Y nos vamos a congregar el próximo año y vas a poder juntarte y codearte con miembros certificados. Y te voy a comentar cómo. Cuando ustedes se hacen parte de Maxwell Leadership, van a recibir 3 certificaciones internacionales. Una certificación como capacitador, que te va a enseñar, valga la redundancia. Como adultos, buscamos enseñarles a otra persona basada en la repetición y cometemos un error gigante. Eso se le enseña a los niños con la repetición. Con la repetición. Como adultos, aprendemos es con la andragogía, con la experiencia. Todo eso y mucho más lo vas a aprender tú en 27 horas que tienes de capacitación como capacitador. Adicional a eso, vas a tener un entrenamiento de oratoria, cómo crear tu propio storytelling, cómo poder comunicarte, cómo conectar con otras personas. Tienes un entrenamiento de 30 horas para que te da la certificación en oratoria. Y por supuesto, coaching profesional. Tienes un entrenamiento de 70 horas que te va a ayudar a llevar a personas de donde están a donde quieren ir, enfocándose en sus propias fortalezas y mejorando sus debilidades para que puedan llegar a un promedio y alcanzar metas que ellos mismos se trazan. Y tú vas a ser el agente de cambio que vas a llevar a las personas a través de esas 3 certificaciones que vas a recibir. Adicional a eso, adicional a las 3 certificaciones que recibes, vas a tener tu credibilidad, vas a poder construir tu marca personal. Algo que escuchamos mucho allá afuera hoy en día. Tu marca personal eres tú. La gente te va a comprar a ti, tu producto y tu servicio. Sí, tienes un respaldo de John Maxwell y Maxwell Leadership que te va a dar autoridad, pero tú vas a construir tu marca. Tú vas a aprender y vas a tener herramientas para hacerlo. Adicional a eso, para poder construir tu marca, vas a tener recursos legales, recursos de marketing. Nosotros te damos todo, te capacitamos, te entrenamos, te damos las herramientas para que tú puedas utilizarlas y que puedas monetizar tus conocimientos. Escúchame bien, que puedas monetizar tus conocimientos y puedas, de todo lo que estás aprendiendo, si tú lo deseas, hacer un negocio. Como lo hice yo en el 2015 cuando me certifiqué, que creé mi propia consultoría y hoy vivo de eso. Adicional, todo el dinero que tú generes utilizando los conocimientos se queda contigo. Tú no nos tienes que pagar regalías ni renovaciones. Tú ya estás pagando tu certificación. Ya eres parte de nosotros y con nosotros recibes educación y soporte continuo de por vida. Tienes un acceso vitalicio sin pagar renovaciones, sin pagar regalías. ¿Qué puedes hacer con todo lo que tú vas a recibir? Y toma nota o tómale una foto, toma un pantallazo si estás viendo en tu dispositivo móvil. Vas a poder hacer formaciones, capacitaciones, asesorías y consultorías estratégicas porque vas a tener el contenido para hacerlo. Vas a poder hacer acompañamientos y mentorías personalizadas. Vas a poder hacer conferencias, charlas, talleres especializados en temas. Ya te voy a mostrar qué temas puedes utilizar. Programas de desarrollo y crecimiento personal. Ahora, si tú tienes ya un contenido creado, si ya tienes información que has aprendido y que estás aplicando, buenísimo. Con las bases que vas a aprender en la certificación, puedes llevar ese contenido a un nivel más alto. Pero si tú apenas estás iniciando y este es el sueño que quieres hacer realidad el día de hoy, comenzar a capacitarte para poder enseñarle a otros, enseñarles a crecer, capacitar a otros, vas a tener 9 licencias. 9 licencias, cursos basados en los libros de John Maxwell que puedes utilizar para enseñar. Y cada uno de estos cursos tiene PowerPoint, guiones, hojas de trabajo, tienen toda la información. Tú lo único que tienes que hacer es aprender tu capacitación, aprender ese contenido y empezar a aplicarlo. Y para poder aplicarlo, tienes el acompañamiento de 9 mentores que se van a rotar llamadas en vivo, llamadas por Zoom semanalmente. Tú vas a tener en la plataforma donde vas a tener el aprendizaje un calendario y ese calendario te va a mostrar las fechas de las llamadas y tú te conectas tan rápido como un clic. Te conectas y tienes la llamada en vivo. Si tú no te puedes conectar a esas llamadas, que son 2 a 4 llamadas a la semana, quedan grabadas y tienes acceso a esas grabaciones también. El aprendizaje es continuo y somos la única organización a nivel mundial que te da aprendizaje continuo vitalicio con una sola inversión. vas a tener 3 tipos de llamadas. Cuando tú te haces parte del equipo, una llamada de bienvenida donde te van a mostrar todo el recorrido. Vas a tener llamadas ABC, que son llamadas donde te muestran la plataforma, donde te acompañan. Y tienes llamadas de atención al cliente, de atención a miembros, donde te van a ayudar cuando tengas preguntas. Siempre tienes acompañamiento, siempre. O sea que no estás solo para crear un impacto en tu vida o en la vida de las personas que te rodean. Y adicional a eso, una de las partes mías favoritas de la certificación es que vas a poder estar con John Maxwell en persona, con Juan Beriken, el presidente del equipo, con los mentores y con 2.500 miembros que se van a certificar en nuestro próximo evento que toma lugar en Colombia en mayo del 2025. Son 3 días de capacitación, de crecimiento, de ponencias y donde John Maxwell te va a firmar tu libro, donde tú vas a tener la oportunidad de conocerlo a él. Ahora, ¿cómo quieres recibir? ¿Quieres saber? Déjame, estoy mirando aquí el chat. ¿Quieres saber cómo puedes recibir tu libro y que John Maxwell te lo firme en el evento en vivo? Los leo en el chat, lo estoy viendo acá. Tengo más. Patricia, excelente. Diana, Lady, Renata, Margarita, Otto, Sergio, Joan, excelente. Mis compañeros van a estar, los otros asesores del programa que nos acompañan en el equipo, van a estar compartiendo un link en el chat para que ustedes soliciten la información y podamos contactarnos con ustedes, podamos ponernos en contacto para aclarar las inquietudes y que ustedes conozcan todos los detalles del programa, que ustedes puedan recibir el brochure, que puedan recibir el contenido, que aclaren esas inquietudes. Ahora, al éxito le encanta la velocidad. Al éxito le encanta la velocidad. Y quiero aprovechar y compartir esto contigo. Durante la transmisión que hizo Mark Cole y John Maxwell, Mark Cole le hizo una pregunta profunda a John Maxwell. Y quiero que le pongas mucha atención a esta pregunta que le hizo y a la respuesta de John Maxwell. Vamos a la pregunta y volvemos en segundos.
John, why did you start the team and why are you continuing to make this available to 52,000, 55,000?
Well, I just do it because I want to add value to the people that are on this call right now. You know, everywhere I travel, I go nowhere to speak without John Maxwell coaches showing up because they're around the world. And whenever they show up, I always want to, first of all, say how grateful I am for them being on the team, how I'm glad to be their papa, their father, their mentor, the person that really takes care of them and wants them to be successful. So I let them know how proud I am to have them on the team. But then I always ask this question, are you glad that you invested in yourself? Are you glad that you became a John Maxwell team member? If I've asked that question once, I've asked that question 2,000 times. Because wherever I'm with a team member, I always say, are you glad that you invested in yourself? Are you glad that you put some money down and said, I am going to be part of a John Maxwell team? Okay, let's say I've asked that question 2,000 times. That's not an exaggeration. Every time they say yes. I've never had one team member say, you know, really, John, it was kind of a waste of time and a waste of money. No. They all say, oh, I'm so glad. And almost all of them say to me, without me asking, I've received so much more than what I invested. It was one of the greatest deals, one of the greatest investments I've ever made myself. That makes me proud. And so when you ask that question, I just say, thousands of coaches are, when I ask that question, say it was a great opportunity, it was a great investment, and they were glad they did.
Me encanta, porque concuerdo totalmente con lo que John Maxwell dice. Estoy súper agradecido y pienso, como él decía temprano, en abundancia, haberme certificado en el 2015, haber tomado esa decisión. Talentos tenía para hablar en público, para vender, para conectar con personas. Es parte de mi personalidad. Pero haber tomado la decisión de certificarme con Maxwell Leadership me abrió puertas que no pensé que iba a tener. Yo llevaba 15 años trabajando en la misma empresa. Independizarme, trabajar para mí, me daba pavor, me hacía así, me temblaba todo. Pero lo hice con el respaldo, con el contenido, con las herramientas y el acompañamiento de los mentores de Maxwell Leadership. Y para resumir, porque quiero que ustedes tomen esa decisión como yo la tomé en el 2015, que la tomen el día de hoy, porque les aseguro que la mejor decisión que pueden tomar en formación y en inversión propia. Ustedes van a recibir 3 certificaciones: oratoria, coaching y capacitación. Son 3 certificaciones internacionales respaldadas por John Maxwell, por Maxwell Leadership. Adicional a eso, van a recibir el acceso a la plataforma en línea de por vida. No tienen que pagar regalías ni renovaciones. Van a tener las llamadas en vivo por Zoom con los mentores, 2 a 4 llamadas semanales de por vida. Van a tener las grabaciones de esas llamadas también, si no se pueden conectar. Adicional a eso, van a tener herramientas de monetización. Tienen la formación, tienen el acompañamiento, tienen la guía y tienen el contenido que pueden utilizar sin necesidad de pagarnos a nosotros de nuevo. Todo lo tienen en la plataforma, ustedes lo aprenden y lo pueden aplicar para estar enseñando. Adicional a eso, van a tener el acceso al evento en vivo de 3 días con John Maxwell, con invitados especiales y 2.500 miembros que se van a certificar. Ese evento va a ser en mayo del 2025. Lo único que tendrían que pagar ustedes adicional es hotel y pasajes, porque todo está incluido en el paquete de certificación. Y sé que ustedes se están preguntando, pero John, dígame cuánto vale, cuánto es la inversión. Y lo estoy leyendo precisamente en el chat. Si ustedes ya saben quién es su asesor del programa, mándenle un WhatsApp, mándenle un correo, háganle señales de humo, conecten hoy mismo, porque hoy mismo tenemos una oferta súper especial para que ustedes tomen la decisión que deben tomar el día de hoy. Ustedes van a tener un descuento del 35% cuando hacen su pago de contado. Ahora, esta oferta es de tiempo limitado. Son 24 horas. Ustedes no necesitan las 24 horas para tomar la decisión. Yo estoy seguro que viendo a John Maxwell, escuchándolo, tomando nota, ustedes ya tomaron la decisión. Y en el chat yo leía y decía, soy seguidor de John Maxwell desde que tengo uso de razón y de liderazgo. Ustedes son personas que ya tomaron la decisión, pero estaban buscando o esperando una señal o una oportunidad como el día de hoy. Adicional a ese 35% de descuento que ustedes van a recibir, reciben los siguientes bonos igual por límite de tiempo. Al éxito le encanta la velocidad y John Maxwell ha abierto las puertas a ustedes para que entren con pie derecho. Primero van a recibir una entrada al Lead Summit de Bogotá que va a ser en agosto 8. Es un evento que hemos preparado con invitados especiales el próximo mes, donde vamos a estar compartiendo. John Maxwell en persona va a estar en el evento. Vamos a estar invitados especiales que ustedes van a estar conociendo. Ustedes van a tener la entrada Gold a ese evento por hacer su pago de contado el día de hoy. Adicional a eso, una mentoría grupal con Juan Beriken. Juan Beriken es el presidente del equipo de español, es el presidente del equipo portugués, es la mano derecha de John Maxwell para Latinoamérica por más de 35 años. También van a tener su copia del libro y van a tener acceso a un VIP donde John Maxwell les va a firmar el libro. Ustedes van a poder conocerlo en persona, él les firma el libro, ustedes van a tener una copia del libro en español, y él se las va a firmar. Esos bonos son adicionales, pero ustedes los reciben por tomar acción el día de hoy. Y como si fuera poco, y lo repito de nuevo, al éxito le encanta la velocidad. Ustedes van, las primeras 10 personas que tomen acción y entren a certificarse, contacten a su asesor, ya estoy listo, estoy lista, quiero comenzar hoy mismo, van a recibir estos 2 cursos digitales, las 15 leyes indispensables de crecimiento, uno de mis libros favoritos de John Maxwell, en competencia con y también cada día con propósito, porque es muy importante que seamos intencionales. El cementerio está lleno de personas con buenas intenciones, pero muy pocos intencionales que muy poca gente lo recuerda. Y hoy es un día de tomar decisiones intencionales para crear nuestro impacto en nuestra vida y en la vida de las personas que nos rodean. Recuerden, en el link del chat ustedes pueden contactar con su asesor de programa o pueden escanear este QR, tómenlo en un pantallazo para que nos podamos poner en contacto, para que podamos conectar y aclarar cualquier inquietud. A veces las inquietudes que tenemos para tomar acción son sencillas de aclarar. Es más el miedo de tomar una decisión de lo que pueda pasar. Miedo a tener abundancia, miedo a estar mejor, miedo a algo que es mucho mejor y más grande que nosotros mismos. Yo los invito a que contacten a su asesor ya mismo. Pónganse en contacto, WhatsApp, mensajes de humo, correo, lo que sea. para que conozcan toda la información, que conozcan las posibilidades que tienen para comenzar el día de hoy una nueva historia, para que ustedes puedan hacerse parte de Maxwell Leadership. Para mí de verdad es un placer compartir con ustedes el día de hoy. Yo les voy a dejar aquí este QR para que ustedes puedan responder a este llamado del día de hoy, para que se puedan unir a un asesor del programa y aclarar las inquietudes que tengan. Y fuera de eso, que puedan obtener su copia del último libro de John Maxwell en español y firmado, que no está en el mercado, no está disponible. Nosotros lo vamos a tener como primicia en ese evento de certificación. Veo en el chat. Resumen, perfecto. Vamos a resumir todo rápidamente en los últimos 2 minutos que tenemos de la transmisión para que ustedes puedan tomar nota. ¿Qué reciben cuando se hacen parte de Maxwell Leadership? Reciben 3 certificaciones internacionales. Una certificación en oratoria para desarrollar esa habilidad de comunicación. Una certificación como capacitador para desarrollar esa habilidad de enseñar. Y una certificación como coach profesional para desarrollar esa habilidad de poder escuchar a un nivel y llevar a las personas de donde se encuentran a donde quieren llevar con un proceso especializado del coaching. Adicional a eso, ustedes van a recibir acceso a una plataforma en línea de por vida, donde tienen todo dividido por módulos. Ustedes van a tener el tiempo para el aprendizaje. En promedio, si tú le dedicas 3 a 4 horas, en 3 meses estás aplicando todos estos resultados y no se me haría extraño que en 3 meses tú estés haciendo capacitaciones utilizando el contenido de la plataforma y ya estés monetizando, teniendo un retorno a la inversión que vas a hacer el día de hoy. Adicional a eso, tienes llamadas de acompañamiento, llamadas de enseñanza con 9 mentores diferentes que se rotan las llamadas. Esas llamadas son 2 a 4 llamadas semanales. Significa que tienes hasta 13 llamadas al mes de por vida. Y si no te puedes conectar a las llamadas en vivo, son grabadas y tienes acceso a las grabaciones. También tienes la licencia con contenidos basados en los libros de John Maxwell, que tú puedes utilizar para hacer capacitaciones, para entrenar a personas, para hacer talleres. Tienen los PowerPoint, los guiones, hojas de trabajo, elementos de marketing para crear tu marca personal y poder promocionar tus eventos y promocionarte tú mismo. Recuerda que la gente te compra a ti con el respaldo que tú tienes, con la autoridad que estás creando con Maxwell Leadership. Y adicional a eso, tienes la entrada al evento de certificación en Colombia, mayo 2025, 3 días, donde vas a estar con John Maxwell, Juan Beriken, invitados especiales, los mentores de la plataforma y 2.500 miembros que se van a certificar. De nuevo, para mí es un privilegio, un honor poder estar compartiendo con ustedes el día de hoy. En el chat del Zoom, en el chat donde ustedes están conectados, van a ver el link para que se puedan conectar con uno de los asesores del programa si no saben quién es su asesor, o pueden escanear este QR para que uno de los asesores se ponga en contacto con ustedes. Si ya saben quién es su asesor, mándenle el mensaje, mándenle en correo, mándenle en señales de humo para que aprovechen la oferta del día de hoy, un 35% de descuento por su pago de contado y los bonos espectaculares que tenemos de acción rápida y por su registro el día de hoy. Esto ha sido todo por hoy. Para mí ha sido un placer acompañarlos en esta transmisión de las 3A para hacerse un líder de alto nivel. Nos vemos en Colombia en mayo 2025.